So I'd like to introduce Gal, who will be talking about hacking ISPs with point-to-pwn protocol over Ethernet, so PPPoE. Yeah. So please give a warm ShmooCon welcome.
All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to my talk on hacking ISP with PPPoE, or as I like to call it, point-to-pwn protocol over Ethernet. So first, I'd like to thank ShmooCon for having me. I really enjoyed the con. This is the first time for me, and I hope you guys also enjoyed. Before I begin, I would like to share a quick story. So on this research, I've been working on and off for the last 2 years. That was, of course, during the pandemic, and like everybody, I had to work from my home. Back then, I used to work from my kitchen table that, as you can see, had my computer, near some lemons, onion, there's a mint over there behind the screen, and a really big network equipment lying on my kitchen table for a year. So let me just give you a quick example of how this device sounds like. I'm going to use my phone for that. And it's not that just a startup, that's constantly the noise of that thing. So before I begin, I must thank my wife, Ortal, for sharing a single bedroom apartment with that thing. So yeah, okay. Wait, okay. All right, so let's begin. So my name is Gal, and I've been causing ruckus on embedded devices for quite some time now. As I said, this is a 2 years long research, and I actually started working on it at Aleph Research, and I ended it in CyberArk Labs, where I work today as a research manager. And well, today we're going to talk about 3 subjects. The first, I'll introduce the idea and motivation behind hacking internet service providers. After that, we'll do a crash course in Layer 2 communication protocol and present a cool vulnerability I found. And lastly, I'll share how I was able to research this kind of equipment, and hopefully I might convince you that at the end of the day, research at big ISP network equipment is not that different from a small router, home router. All right, so let's begin with pwning internet service provider, AKA ISPs. All right, so we all know how a classic remote attack is executed. An attacker looks for a victim on the internet, maps the target's attack surface by discovering what protocol the target uses, and then try to use O-Day or N-Day and hopefully get RC on the target. And ironically, many of these old school attacks still very much feasible on home routers. So I started with this idea that ISP network equipment should not be that different. Instead of the internet, we got the ISP network accessible from the local modem. And instead of the internet server, we got the ISP equipment that provide us services, the subscribers. So all we have to do is map the attack surfaces and find an O-Day. Hopefully, with this O-Day, you can get RCE on the ISP network equipment, and we're done. But why attacking ISPs? Well, if I was the proud owner of Evilcom Ltd, I might be able to do some of the following stuff. For start, the obvious denial of service and other ransom activities like shutting the network and asking for money to stop doing it. But I can also execute DNS hijack for the whole network, AKA become man in the middle for all subscribers by redirecting their DNS to my evil DNS server. And another interesting idea is to target a specific subscriber with their actual identity, AKA the actual name or other information the ISP stores on them. Also, I might be connected to the internet backbone for IP allocation. So I might be able to execute this crazy scale distributed denial of service. And lastly, I can execute all sorts of attack by abusing common protocol and technology used by the ISP. Okay, so to understand what we're about to attack, let's understand how a basic ISP network operates. Please keep in mind that this is a simplified example for a DSL-based network, but other tunneling protocols such as PPPoE, L2TP, and GPON follow more or less the same concepts. So when you get a router from your ISP, it has two roles. One is to provide network services such as Ethernet and Wi-Fi to your home premise. And the other role is DSL modem functionality. The DSL modem basically uses the good old telephone line to connect you to your ISP and then to the internet. Your modem is hooked up to a phone line, and the telephone company connects the other end of the line to something called DSLAM. DSLAM is basically a multiplexer that extracts signals information from analog signals and send a multiple modem over the telephone line. The DSLAM is then connected to a broadband remote access server, or BRAS, which is basically a big router that routes traffic to and from the DSLAM to the ISP network. So we can abstractly think that our modem is connected with a layer 2 cable directly into the BRAS itself. We can also bridge the modem traffic to our own evil machine, so we can now abstractly think that our malicious machine is connected with a very long cable to the BRAS itself. So if the BRAS is the ISP frontline router, and we are connected to it with a network connectivity, then hacking the BRAS might be the equivalent of hacking the ISP's home router. And, well, this is where our home router takes the power back. They can attack the BRAS in the same way hackers can attack them from the internet. And once we control the BRAS, attacker can execute some of the attacks I mentioned, or attack other ISP equipment. All right, so for this research, I decided to target Redback Network Smart Edge equipment. Back in the 2000s, Redback were a big player in ISP equipment. They actually were involved in defining some of the protocols I'll show today. And in 2007, they were acquired by Ericsson, that continues to manufacture new product and they manufacture new product and still uses the Redback brand. And some of these devices, well, they're pretty big. They can support up to 500,000 subscribers. And yeah, for example, the one that you see on the bottom right-hand side. And well, they also use a custom NetBSD operation system called SEOS, Smart Edge OS. And the device I use for the research, it uses a PowerPC architecture. All right, so now that we have a target and we know it's worth hacking to it, let's understand what kind of protocol can be used to attack an ISP. Let's start with point-to-point protocol over Ethernet, or PPPoE, which is a layer 2 encapsulation protocol. This is a common protocol to connect to ISPs. So in our case, the PPPoE server is the ISP's BRAS. And the PPPoE client is our DSL modem, or a malicious machine. Remember that we just saw that abstractly the client is connected with an Ethernet cable to the BRAS. So as the name of the protocol suggests, by using PPPoE, we can encapsulate PPP session over Ethernet frame. Okay, great, but what is PPP? So PPP stands for point-to-point protocol. It's also a layer 2 protocol, and well, it's being used for tunnel IP packets to and from the modem, and by doing so, enabling internet connectivity. So PPP negotiation is where the client authenticates to the server and gets its configuration parameters. And if all goes smoothly, a PPP tunnel interface is created on the client side. So at this point, the client receives DNS configuration and usually an internet-facing IP address. So at the end of all the negotiation, our router or machine should end up with an interface similar to this one. All right, so also, at any time, the client or the server can terminate the session. So now that we understand that the general flow of the protocol, I'd like to focus on PPP, and especially on the session negotiation part of PPP. So PPP is a layered protocol, and it has 3 components. First, there's an encapsulation component that is used to transmit datagram over the specific physical layer. I'll soon go over on how the format really looks like. The encapsulation is used to transmit link control protocol, or LCP. This protocol establishes, configured, and tests the link, and as well as negotiate settings, options, and use of specific features. And lastly, after the connection is established, different protocols can be used to negotiate and facilitate a layer 3 network layer. In our case, to tunnel IPv4, we use the IP control protocol, or IPCP. Okay, so since PPP is relatively big and it has many protocol layers, I decided to focus on LCP. And this is why. Well, this is the first protocol used in PPP. It uses to set and receive different configurations, and no authentication is needed since it's the first protocol. Okay, so to really understand PPP, let's understand its encapsulation format. So first, we got an Ethernet frame with PPPoE payload. The PPP encapsulate a PPP payload. The PPPoE encapsulate a PPP payload. And in this example, the encapsulated PPP packet is an LCP type of packet. Now, let's understand how LCP packet looks like. LCP packet contains an options payload to pass different parameters. For example, authentication protocol, magic number, maximum receive units, etc. While each option has a code number, a length, and data. So for example, here we see an LCP packet that contains parameter for maximum receive units, authentication protocol, and a magic number. And this is the different options value. And there are all sorts of other parameters defined in the protocol, but the one I found the most interesting was actually the last one in this list. That's the code number 19, endpoint discriminator option. I don't have really enough time to get into what this option does, and actually soon you'll see it doesn't really matter. Whoops. Something went wrong, that's for sure. Okay, wait. Be back in a minute. Okay. Woo! Thank you. Wait, now we got my notes. Boo! Okay. Hopefully, we'll be back soon. Or not, and then I'll have just to... Yay! Okay, yes, okay. So I was saying that from this list, the most interesting LCP option that I found was the last one, the endpoint discriminator options. And as I said, I don't really got enough time to get into it. It doesn't really matter. Because I discovered that although the RFC defines that, you guys see that screen, right? Okay, hope it's enough. So I discovered that although the RFC defines that this parameter length should not exceed the value of 20, the Smart Edge device actually handles packets with bigger length. And also I saw there is no validation on the data field. I noticed that when the PPP log is established in the Smart Edge device, I get long entries similar to this. So on the log below, you can see that the different LCP parameters being written. So for example, this is the authentication protocol used, and this is the magic number passed. And we can also see the AAA data field from the endpoint discriminator field. So I'm writing a log entry with any data that I wish, with a bigger length than expected. So I think you guys know what's coming next. Yes, vanilla Stack Overflow in the Smart Edge log entries. Yeah, and this is a great time for a demo. Okay, so let's see it in action. Okay, so for this demo, I'll be using 4 terminals. The bottom blue terminal is only a monitor terminal connected to the Smart Edge device itself. The red and the green terminals on the left-hand side will act as the STD in and STD out listeners for the reverse shell. And the black terminal on the right-hand side will execute my attack connected as a Smart Edge subscriber. Okay, so now I'm running Netcat to listen to STD in and STD out using the standard protocols of ports, of course. Right. And now I will execute my attack by piping /bin/sage to 2 Smart Edge telnet clients. So this is the first STD in telnet client piped into the bin/sage and the STD out telnet client. Yeah. Okay, so this will send 2 PPPoE negotiation packets and then the LCP payload. So that's the first 2 packets. And now you can see on the monitor that the Smart Edge device received the LCP packet, and hopefully we'll get a core dump. Yeah, that means we managed to crash the PPPD daemon. So now I can use my STD netcat to send commands, and as you can see, I'm using ls. Yeah, so I'm the user root, and I can also access the configuration file in this device that are stored on the flash drive, and I can change them and edit the DNS configuration and get the admin passcode and whatever. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so now that we've seen a full working RCE, let's talk about how to research this kind of equipment. So the most interesting conclusion I got from this research is that ISP network equipment is not that different from home routers when it comes to vulnerability research. Let's talk about the differences. So home routers are, of course, cheaper, usually around $300 or so, while brass entry-level cost is higher for sure. Both of them usually never gets updated. Yeah, I mean, it's great for hackers. It's really bad for everybody else. And as you might already heard, brass are way, way noisier. So if you plan to stir them on your kitchen table, expect to annoy people around you. And probably the hardest part is the setup. Setup and configuration parts. Since our equipment usually takes a specific kind of expertise to install. But if you got some extra dollars and you're stubborn enough, you can also pawn an ISP network equipment. So based on my experience with this research, I'm thrilled to present my 7 easy steps for research and pawning ISP devices. So let's go over the steps. Firmware emulation, setting up debug and development environment, jailbreak if needed, get or buy an actual device, search and hopefully find vulnerabilities, write an exploit, and finally celebrate with your favorite beverage. Okay, so the first step for every embedded device research is usually getting the firmware. I was lucky enough to find one online, and after a quick beanwalk, I realized Smart Edge uses a NetBSD OS and a PowerPC architecture. And luckily, up until 2006, Apple were using a PowerPC processors with their BSD-based kernel. And this nice fella called Kiernai posted a wonderful Reddit blog on how to emulate a very similar system to the one Smart Edge are using. And that way I was able to emulate the user space of the Smart Edge firmware. Now for setting a debug and development environment. Well, I quickly realized that cross-compilation of a different OS and a different architecture is a complete nightmare. So I just decided to use my QEMU machine and just compile static tools. I also use this SSH TCP dump trick to sniff packets from my emulated device into my Wireshark host. That was super useful in understanding the different protocols of the device, of the emulated device. But I also had an issue with remote debugging. So my GDB multi-arch on my Ubuntu machine refused to connect to the PowerPC NetBSD system. So instead of spending time trying to solve the problem and trying to understand what's the problem, I just decided to run GDB client from my emulated environment, and actually that was very useful later on when I did the exact same trick on the device itself. Okay, so next step was to understand if a jailbreak is needed for debugging an actual device. So as you can expect, it has. So Smart Edge are using this exec_CLI binary to handle all console commands. So logging from telnet, SSH, serial ports, they all end up with this jail terminal. But exec_CLI must run some kind of external binaries, right? So interesting example is when you use the telnet command. It executes this CE_telnet binary. By the way, this is the same telnet client I used for my exploitation in the POC. Luckily, I found that this telnet client had some internal command added to it, and this command simply invokes a jail-free subshell. Please note that this is a telnet client, so to run the internal telnet command, I use this trick where I telnet into my local host. And now, as you can see, I can just invoke a sub command. And all left to do is to use an exclamation point and pop myself a jail-free CLI. Yay. Okay, so now that I know that if I'll get my hands on an actual device, I can execute any code I desire. For example, this GDB server that Redback was kind enough to leave in their firmware and save me the cross-compilation. And next, I decided to buy an actual device. So theoretically, I could continue with my research on the emulated device and maybe even find vulnerabilities. But I had some issues around it. Well, I was missing the actual device configuration. I had to do some serious LD preload voodoo magic to get the emulation working, which made it, well, pretty limited to specific binaries and pretty unstable. And, well, if I had a real device, I could develop a full working exploit. So I went to eBay and bought the cheapest device I could find, which is the Smart Edge 100. It cost around $2 grand. And Aleph Research was kind enough to fund this. By the way, at this point, I left Aleph Research and moved to CyberArk Labs. So I finally got an actual device. But I soon realized that I got very little knowledge in setting up an ISP equipment. And I had to acquire some kind of ISP technician skills. So I started by reading this 100-page manual about basic hardware guide, just to understand how to physically connect stuff into the device. I then had to read these 360 pages of basic system configuration to understand what configuration I actually need to set up an ISP-like setup. And lastly, to actually work with the damn device, I used this, with the CLI, I had to use this 900-page manual. And, well, this is how I pretty much felt from all this useless information in my head. Okay, so to apply all the information, let's first go over the device SASHI. So most of the ports on the device are either Ethernet or optical ports. To these ports, the ISP connects other network equipment, such as switches, routers, and DSLAM. And the most important, the subscribers are connected to these ports. So my attack should be executed from one of these ports. The other ports are used for managing the device. So we got 2 Ethernet management port and a single serial port. So there's 2 ways to configure and manage the device. The most convenient is, of course, the Ethernet port by using Telnet or SSH. But these ports can also be used for monitor logs, packets, and remote debugging with GDB, which is super useful. But the serial port is still also very useful since it's foolproof. Meaning that even if I completely mess up the device, I can always restore it with the serial port. And believe me, I have messed up the device configuration like a million times. Okay, so finally, I was able to configure the device with around 200 configuration commands. And I was ready for a full ISP-like installation. My setup included an Ubuntu machine, 3 network cards, and a serial port. I started by connecting the serial port to the foolproof console port. I then used one network device to connect to the management Ethernet port. And then I connected another network interface to simulate an actual subscriber connected to the bus. So please note that this is where I'm going to run the vulnerability itself, from the subscriber. And lastly, I installed the device in our server room and connected my Ubuntu machine to the internet, so, well, I won't have to work from my kitchen table. So now that I own a Smart Edge device, and I understand how to configure it, and I got myself a fancy server rack, I became the proud owner of Evilcom Ltd. So you guys, you're more than welcome to become my subscriber so I can abuse you. It's free of charge for sure. Let me know if you're interested. But besides becoming an ISP, I finally reached to the research phase. Now I had 3 useful tools to help me with research: the Smart Edge logs, a GDB server, and a Wireshark monitoring. Smart Edge is running a daemon called PPPD that handles PPP sessions. With some reversing, I realized that incoming PPP packets are being handled by this function called packet receive. And packet receive calls a demux input packet function for every valid packet it receives. So this function is a log stream multiplexer for input packets. Let me explain what it means. It uses function pointers to call different functions depending on what sub-PPP protocol is being used. So here we see 3 logs protocol functions for LCP, IPCP, and NLCP. And as you guys already know, I was interested in the LCP log function. And this is where I discovered that the endpoint discriminator uses this, the endpoint discriminator logging uses this unsafe memcopy to the stack. And if we go back to the LCP options payload example, this is where the memcopy copies the data I control with the invalid length to a 35 bytes stack array. All right, and finally, it's exploitation time. So the stack exploitation development was pretty straightforward. There were no stack protection whatsoever, and I chose to use a single rope gadget to exec VE. But the demo I showed you earlier, well, it has this naive assumption. I was using a reverse IP shell. Basically, in the demo, I assumed that the bus has some kind of IP connectivity, and it was able to create a reverse shell to a remote server. Then the attacker can control the bus by connecting to the control server. But what if the bus has no IP connectivity, or it's blocked by a firewall? Well, how can I get a shell on the device using only a layer 2 layer? So I decided to develop a layer 2 only shell, meaning the entire shell will be executed over Ethernet frame without the need for IP protocol. In other words, the subscriber can control the device directly. So the first problem I had, was dealing with the stack overflow exploitation. It was limited to only shell commands. So I decided to execute my exploit to deploy a bridgehead. Bridgehead is a term for running a small exploit to upload a bigger exploit. I was looking for an easy way to execute a shell command that will allow me to upload a file using only layer 2 connection. And luckily, TCP dump was found on the device. And I used this very cool trick to upload a file from a specific MAC address. So here we see that the TCP dump writes the content of 106 frames to a file called L2 shell. I also use this filter only to pick up frames with a specific magic MAC source address. But I had one problem. TCP dump writes a pickup file, so I had to trim away all the data except for my payload. So I then decided to add this functionality to my shellcode. Please note that the actual shellcode was written in PowerPC, but just for the sake of simplicity, I'm showing the C code. So I search for a magic in the pickup file, and if found, I concatenate a constant offset to a new file. So fragments of my payload were found on the pickup file. And if my shellcode finds the magic, it just copies the offset of my payload to another file. This needs to be done over and over for all the magic found in the pickup file. And finally, I was no longer limited to only run shell commands. I can upload any binary I wish and execute it by running my exploit once again. The final issue left to solve was the layer 2 communication. Since I wish to listen to layer 2 connection, I needed some sort of raw socket functionality, and unfortunately, Smart Edge has implemented their own undocumented raw socket. So I could just use it easily. Fortunately, I found that this /dev/bpf was installed. Ironically, the only binary that uses the /dev/bpf was the TCP dump I just abused. Okay, so I had to configure BPF with these two flags. The first is telling BPF which interface to listen, and the other flag is to receive packets immediately. And that's it. So to wrap it all up, I first had to deploy the bridgehead with my Stack Overflow exploit. I then had to use the Stack Overflow again to run a layer 2 shell I upload with TCP dump. And finally, my L2 shell is running and waits for a specific magic and then extracts the command shell and just execute them. All right, and that's it. I finally fully pwned the device. But wait, there's more. So now I would like to share with you another very interesting bug discovered by Omer Tsarfati. Omer is a senior researcher at CyberArk Labs, and I hope you guys had a chance to see his amazing talk yesterday about vulnerable Windows drivers. So to understand Omer vulnerability, let's understand how PPPoE session works. So every PPPoE packet has a code field. This field sets what type of message is being used in the PPPoE negotiation. So the first phase is actually not mandatory, and it's mostly needed for the client to discover the PPPoE server MAC address. It does that by sending an initiation packet and receive an offer from the server. And the next step is mandatory. And in this phase, the client requests a session number so he can start a session. So the client sends padar, aka request, and receives pades, aka session, from the server. So it's very important to notice that both sides can terminate the session at any time by using pati, aka termination. So Omer discovered that when the client sends padar request with a broadcast as a source address, the Smart Edge PPPoE server sends a session packet with broadcast as destination address. Yeah. Weird. We know. Since no client expects an FFFFF as a destination address, it sends it again and again. And if the server is configured with session timeout, it then sends a termination packet. But this termination packet has a broadcast as destination MAC address. Meaning that the server asks all their clients to terminate their sessions. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, but there's a bot here. This attack also depends on the switch policy and whether or not the DSL endpoint terminate their sessions, if they actually receive this, broadcast termination with no session number. But anyway, it's a really cool bug, and it's a really nice idea for an attack. Okay, so now that we managed to pwn our smart edge devices, all it left is to drink rum at your favorite tiki bar. And yeah, as for fingerprinting, so I managed to detect around 500 devices in 55 different organizations from 20 different countries using smart edge devices. But remember, folks, these devices are not supposed to be publicly facing, so I'm sure there are many more. I reached out to Ericsson, and we worked together to reproduce and understand the issues and their severity. Yeah. Ericsson suggested to handle the CVE assignment, and they provided a CVE number for the Stack Overflow, and actually even for the slide is not updated, or even for the denial of service that Omer found with the CVSS of critical for the Stack Overflow. And Ericsson also announced that smart edge devices has reached end of line, meaning these vulnerabilities are infinity day. Yeah. We also brainstorm on possible mitigations, and they communicate their mitigation and the issues to their customers. And as for mitigations, so I strongly recommend disabling PPP logs on the smart edge devices. As for Omer's denial of service attack, I believe that it can be blocked with switch configuration. And well, also smart edge are really old devices, and it's just highly recommend to replace them. To conclude, I hope I convince you that ISP network devices are not that different from small home routers. And well, old school is still cool, and a 50 years old network device can still cause a big ruckus. And as always, ISP usually don't pay attention to updates when it comes to both their endpoint and their backend equipment. Looking forward, a blog post will be posted soon, for sure. I might also look into some other attack surface that I discovered while researching smart edge devices. And lastly, I might have a look on their other vendors out there. And yeah, this is it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Feel free to reach out to me. See the last season of Solar Opposites, it's really good. And if you guys got any question.
So, in a former life, I was the offset guy for an ISP.
Thank you.
I will say, when I started, read back for end of life, and I was like, we should get rid of these. They're end of life. We're buying them. We're buying parts off eBay to support these. And when I left, after 10 years, we were still buying parts off eBay. Here in the major metro area of DC.
Yeah. So I hope that this talk can convince people to just replace them. They're ancient.
These are very much in production.
Yeah.
Well, so the issue with tracing VRASs in production is that, A, no one knows how to do it, and two,
So yeah,
the replacement cost is shockingly high because if you're gonna buy new gear, it's like 10-fold more expensive. It's shocking, it's really dumb.
yeah.
Why ISPs are failing everything.
Thank you. All right, so if anybody got a question, you can catch me later on.
I got one more.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Could you provide like a hot patch for people who want to keep it going?
Yeah, sure. So my blog post will have this, just the command it uses, but in general, just disabling, so for the Stack Overflow, disabling the log, the command is just like, I don't remember the command exactly, but something log, disable PPP filter, so that should do. Yeah.
How long did your wife put up with the dead?
Oh boy. If you ask her too much, but it was like, oh sorry, okay, I got it. So the question was how long my wife did put up with this. I would say half a year or so. Yeah.
You're a lucky man.
Yes, I know. No. Anything else? Yeah.
Are there other logging functionalities or like logging further down, or is the solution literally just don't know what the clients are doing?
So let me just repeat the question. Are there any other log functionality? Yeah, so that's the question, just to be sure. So yeah, and I looked, I was looking at most of the LCP log functionality, but they might be, every protocol, every sub-protocol, the PPPoE, the PPP, everything got like log functionality. They might be other vulnerabilities out there. I can't really say, but from what I inspected, I didn't find anything else except for that. Okay? Oh, yeah, go ahead. All right, so the question is which other protocol I looked into it except for LCP. So I was looking into the IPCP, which is the IP protocol. And well, also, so I had this, PPPoE for sure. I was also looking into it. And I think that's about it. Okay, thank you guys so much.